I went to my first in-person college women's gymnastics meet, and I gotta be honest with you, it's a very cool experience. I think women's gymnastics is one of the sports that people often forget about when the Olympics are not actively on. And what's really cool about this sport is if you do tune into NCAA gymnastics, there's a very big possibility that you can see Olympic gold medalists for like a couple of bucks. I live in LA, which means that we do in fact have the Olympics at home because Jordan Chiles, Olympic gold medalist, actually competes on the UCLA women's gymnastics team, which means that for a whopping total of $54, including taxes and fees, I can just literally go watch an Olympic gold medalist do gymnastics. While I am one of those people that actively tunes into the Olympics like very, very hardcore every 4 years, I have never actually gone to an in-person gymnastics meet. And so when the Bruins took on Penn State, I was like, $54, absolutely, sign me up. And just off the bat, I'm gonna tell you, if you have the ability to go to a gymnastics meet, like if you have a team that is close to you in your local town, if you're in LA or otherwise, a women's gymnastics meet is very, very cool. I did kind of know what to expect just from like following gymnastics regularly, or semi-regularly at least, but it was honestly even cooler than I really expected. Firstly, the intros, the vibe, it is unparalleled. These women have smoke cannons and pyrotechnics for their team walk-ons. Each one of these gymnasts comes out, they have a full bio that's read by the announcer, you hear about their hometown, and they go onto this platform where they wave and blow kisses and make heart signs while smoke cannons and fireworks like blow up around them. This is an indoor arena, it's in the Poly Pavilion, and it's very cool. You see every single one of these gymnasts come out, have their moment, and then head over to the main floor. And so like as soon as we sat down, I was already locked in. Did I attend UCLA? Absolutely not. Did I attend USC either? No. But for this moment, I was now a Bruin. I felt so passionately for this team instantly. I also should mention that I was surprised by the crowd purely because this meet was on Valentine's Day, and the student section was pretty much full. They also had an alumni band there that night, and then the side that I was on, which seemed to not be active students, was also relatively full. I kind of expected the meet to be like not necessarily the most attended just because it was Valentine's Day. It was like 8 p.m. on a Friday, but also, you know what? I was there. People are single. It's hard out here. One of the things to definitely know about gymnastics is that if you go to watch them compete, multiple things are happening at the same time. So there are 4 different apparatuses that you're going to see gymnasts compete on if you go to an NCAA gymnastics meet. Those are vault, uneven bars, floor, and beam. And when you're at a gymnastics meet, those events are actually happening concurrently. There are team rotations. This actually happens in the Olympics as well, but I think it's easy to miss because of the way that it's broadcast. Typically, the way that it's broadcast is almost the way they do like NFL Red Zone, where it's just flashing to the moments that they think are the most important at the time. Like if you're watching the Olympics on NBC, they're always going to follow Team USA through their rotation. But while that rotation is happening, usually there's another team on a different apparatus at the same time. And that is something that I think is really interesting about the kind of air around the competition, and something that's very different about watching it in person versus watching it on TV, because you are watching sort of that rotation happen actively. When it's just 2 teams competing like it was for this meet, those 2 teams are going through their rotation, but they're only using 1 apparatus at a time. So not all 4 apparatuses were being utilized at the same time, just 2 at the same time at this meet. Also, I would say there's probably not really a bad place to sit when it comes to watching gymnastics. When I was trying to pick my seat on the map, I was like, oh, do we need to sit close to like the floor because that's my favorite? Or will we not be able to see beam if we're sitting too far away from that? But honestly, at least in this venue, the Poly Pavilion, you could see everything from wherever you were sitting. We were sitting on the side of the vault, which meant that that was like physically the closest apparatus to us. And then across the way, you can see beam. To the right, you would see floor. And then just past that is where the uneven bars were. So again, really wherever you sit, you could have seen pretty much everything. Now, just across the board, one thing that I really thought was cool was the fact that they actually put up sort of a PowerPoint slide for each apparatus as UCLA was going through their rotation. And it showed you what you should look for if you weren't very familiar with the sport. I think something we always see with gymnastics is we're like, how could that possibly not have been a perfect 10? Like she literally just defied gravity. Me personally, I'm always like, if she didn't fall on the ground, I think she should get a 10. And I also constantly think of that scene from Stick It where they're talking about judging and they make the judges do the different apparatuses and do the different tricks and they're like falling all over the place. That's how I feel when I watch gymnastics. Like, why in the world would they not get a perfect 10? Obviously, there are all these elements to the sport, all of the reasons why they score things the way that they do. And right now there is a conversation in college gymnastics about this idea of the way that deductions are happening. We saw Livy Dunn come out and say that like with the new scoring system, perfect 10s are really not being thrown anymore. And then we saw a lot of conversation in response to that about whether or not she knew what she was talking about. Overall, there's been a debate about scoring in general. But what I thought was cool was that I think a lot of people I hear when I talk about sports and about attending sporting events, they feel like they don't know enough to actually go to the event. I went to a hockey game with one of my friends, for example, and she was asking questions throughout the game and I was able to answer most of them. But every once in a while, she asked a question that I didn't know as someone who actively kind of explains sports for my job. There would be something kind of hyper specific or just like a random instance that I was like, yeah, I'd have to look that up. And I think a lot of people, especially women to some degree, are conditioned to believe that if you don't know everything about the sport, you shouldn't attend it or you don't have a right to be there, and don't realize that like everyone can go to a game. You don't have to know everything about it. It would be like saying you can't go to an art museum unless you understand everything about Impressionism. Like, you're gonna look things up, you're gonna learn things, and that's totally normal. And maybe the art museum might not be the best example because people think of it as like a highbrow situation, but honestly, like, that's kind of my point. There shouldn't be this sort of like gatekeeping energy when it comes to sports or art or anything. You should be able to go to a movie, enjoy the movie, and feel good about it. You should be able to go to a Broadway play and not know anything about theater. The thing is, like, experiencing things should always bring curiosity and joy, and this is a long-winded way of saying that they actually showed different things to look for while you were watching the different types of events. So like for floor, for example, you should look for tall controlled landings, a variety of dynamic and high tumbling passes, obtaining 180-degree splits on leaps and jumps, staying in bounds, artistic movement, musicality, and performance quality. I thought this was a super cool way to make sure that everybody at this level watching it was enjoying themselves and also knew what to look for, as opposed to just watching and being like, wow, that was incredible, which obviously you should do and should totally feel free to do that. But it was also cool to see that they were actually involving you as a fan in the specifics of the sport. Additionally, gymnastics meets don't really have like commentary. So there's not someone like there is on television explaining to you like which things are actually doing well and which things are actually doing poorly, why certain judging things were happening. You just actually see the team react to the score, and then you see the score flash or change in the various different places where score is being kept. You see an overall team score for the rotation as well as the scores for each individual gymnast. But again, there's no commentary. There's no announcer saying that like, this is why this happened, this is why this didn't happen, this is why this person's routine was better than the others. And so it did require some level of just understanding the sport itself. But I will say, even if you don't understand any of that, I really think you can enjoy going to a gymnastics meet just as a fan of enjoying like sport as a whole, because the energy at a gymnastics meet is actually unparalleled. I think mentally and culturally we have this like understanding of gymnastics as stick it or make it or break it. These sort of highly dramatized narratives of like cutthroat behavior. There can only be one medalist, you know what I mean? But what's cool about NCAA gymnastics is that it's very much a team sport. While these different apparatuses are scored individually, and at the end they do still say who's winning individually for each apparatus, the overall standings for the team is a team score. And so you watch these women get very, very hyped for each other. The energy of your teammate watching you on the sidelines and like screaming at the top of their lungs is really cool. And also seeing how excited these girls were for each other to like just compete in general, to nail every little thing that they've been working on. You can really feel that team sport energy in gymnastics that I don't know that you necessarily see on TV in the same way. Obviously, one of the coolest parts about it is just watching people do things that you could never dream of doing. But another very cool part about it is watching their teammates hold their breath for them and watching them celebrate in a way that is so loud and excited and big. I also am always a fan of the way teammates line up for the floor exercise and the way that they are actually doing the choreography at a muted way while their teammate finishes their floor routine. And the other cool thing about Jordan Chiles and UCLA in particular was that when Jordan did her floor routine, the actual student section was following along too. And at the end of her routine, she hits this big move and the student section throws confetti, which is very, very fun. I loved going to go see this. It's something that I would definitely go to again, and maybe next year even follow the NCAA season the same way that I follow other sports. And also something that I really loved about it was just the raw passion that you saw from these women. I think Jordan and Simone both talked about this last Olympic cycle, but there's this sort of expectation that women's gymnastics would be sort of ladylike in their celebrations. And that I think we're trying to see some of that change. We're trying to see this sport become a little bit more about the power and excitement behind it and allow those athletes to celebrate in a way that's commensurate to that. I definitely saw that from both of these teams, both Penn State and UCLA. And like, quite frankly, if you finish a flip, like a death-defying, gravity-defying flip off of a 2-inch balance beam onto a mat without hurting yourself, I think you should be allowed to kind of shout like you just defied death, because you literally did. There's something so inherently feminine to me about like girls supporting girls in the way that they do in gymnastics, and also something so powerful and womanly in the way that they celebrated. Every single time one of these girls finished their routine, the entire team was cheering and hugging them and high-fiving, and these gymnasts were screaming and cheering. It's like, yes, you literally are defying physics. We should celebrate that every single time you do something. So for me, this is actually one of my favorite sporting events I've been to this year so far, and it was definitely a new experience for me. I'm curious for you, do you follow women's gymnastics outside of the Olympics? Do you have the ability to go to an NCAA meet in your town? Would you go to one if you haven't before? And do you ever find that you don't watch a sporting event because you feel like you don't know enough about it? Do you think that there is a language barrier or education barrier when it comes to your enjoyment of sports? And do you think that's self-imposed or that someone told you that that was the case? Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and also let me know if there are any other sporting events you want to see me cover this year. If this is the first time you've seen me, I'm Marissa. I cover sports in a way that is just about the fun, inviting nature of it, and also a little bit of an educational aspect of trying to break things down in a way that you can understand without feeling like you're being condescended to. So if you're new here, definitely subscribe because that's the energy you're gonna get, just a love for fandom, sports, and the community that surrounds them. And I'll see you soon!